gosh, hello. Welcome back to More Sewing with Michele. Today, oh my gosh, I've got a lot to cover. I am going to talk about everything in this little tote bag that I made here. And they are all my favorite tools and notions for any type of sewing that I do. And I've got two great products for you today. I have two things designed by Lori Holt from Bee in My Bonnet. I've got this tin mug as well as this tumbler. Oh my gosh, so much to go over today. So let's get going on today's More Sewing with Michele. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is what a find I found when I came across the tumbler and also the tin mug designed by Lori Holt from Bee in My Bonnet. Now, let me give you a little bit of history. I fell in love with Lori Holt and the patterns that she made, Vintage Farm Girl, and I have so many of her books. I am drawn to her passion of bright, bold, fun, farmed theme quilts, as well as other products. I can say, let me tell you, I don't know what this lady doesn't do. She's amazing. Not only is she a published author, she designs notions. She's a fabric designer as well. She is a quilt designer, fabric designer. I mean, anything quilt and sewing related, she's got her hands in, and she does it so well. I am so drawn to her books, her love of vintage look of sewing as well as farm things. She gets her inspiration from buttons and aprons and let's see, what else do I remember? Colorful fabrics, patterns, gingham and dots and stripes. She just loves, I want to say it's like we're the same thing. And on top of that, she's just a farm town girl and she's living in our sewing world. She has really just made things wonderful. So let me talk now about these wonderful things that I found. And I'm going to tell you, I couldn't wait to show these for you. And they're one of the first things that I fell upon when I was doing my research for my vlog here. And it's taken a long time to get this little guy, the tin mug, in so that I could actually do the show. So, but let me talk about the tumbler first. It's a 30-ounce tumbler, and I love it. It's got a wide mouth. I have a thing, I don't like having tumblers that have a straw or anything that's going to make it difficult to clean. This is not the case with this. It's got the one opening. It's got the rubber grip to make it nice and secure. This is my old one, and this is how much I love it. Let's get rid of the old, and I'm going to dive right into my Lori Holt Bee in My Bonnet travel mug, so to speak. And not just for traveling, it can be for anything. I like that it's insulated, so it's going to keep your favorite drink nice and cold for a long period of time. And look, it's got quilt blocks, traditional quilt blocks, and bright, fun colors all the way around, as well as up close here. And it has a little bee, and it says Bee in My Bonnet. It just is so stinking cute. I love this mug. And I will be using it all the time. Now, let me talk a little bit about the tin mug here for drinking. And look how cute. It's got tomato, vintage. Remember how I said she loves vintage? Vintage pin cushions all the way around in different colors. It is a typical tin mug like I used when I used to go camping as a young child. It's got the metal rim. You can hear it as I clank on it. And it's just stinking cute. And it's going to be my favorite morning coffee mug now. It's just one of those things. These are going to make perfect gifts for your friends that sew. Anyone that loves Lori Holt is just going to die to have one of these things. And I love, she thinks about everything. Look at the packaging. It says Stitch Tin Mug. And it's just so cute all the way around. And on this one, look at it. It says, my happy place. And that's for the tumbler. So I love Lori Holt. I love these products. I know that you are going to fall in love and want them too. In order to get them, all you have to do is go to moors-sew.com, or you can click on the link in the description that'll take you to my landing page and you can purchase them there. So don't forget moors-sew.com for this wonderful sewing themed tin mug by Lori Holt from Bee in My Bonnet, or the travel tumbler. And this one, like I said, is 30 ounce, and it's also by Lori Holt, and it's got the cute little bee there. So Lori Holt started her business, Bee in My Bonnet, back in 1994 when she wanted to share her passion and her love of needlework that she learned at a very young age from her mother and her grandmothers. It's just such a wonderful story, and I am so glad that she was inspired by her family, and now she inspires so many more. So Lori Holt, Bee in My Bonnet, you're going to want to pick up these today. Okay, so I want to talk about everything that's in this little bag that I made here. Now, these are my favorite tools that I use. They could be a notion, but they're in my arsenal for whatever I sew. If I'm doing machine embroidery, quilting, if I'm hemming my kids' pants or fixing a hole, doesn't matter what type of sewing I'm doing, these things are my go-tos. They're the things that I want to make sure that I have near me every time I sew. So let's dive right in. So the first thing, oh my golly, probably the most important, is my bobbins. Now, they're probably one of the most underrated type of notion that you have. I like to make sure that I have many bobbins that are empty and ready to go at all times. Now, whenever I quilt a quilt, like this one in back here, I like to match the threads on the fabric on the back side of the quilt. So that means that I will wind about 10 bobbins before I even start. I'm one of those ones, I don't like to stop in the middle and wind a bobbin. So before I start, I will wind about 10. And I use whatever I use. And oftentimes I'll end up with maybe 1 or 2 leftover bobbins that I didn't use. So I will store them in here and I use them. So this little crazy quilted little tote bag here type thing, I use them in there and I use them all the time. So it's not like they go to waste, but I like having those empty bobbins at all times. And I probably have at least 50 where I can wind a bobbin, have it ready to go, and I'm good to go. And I like having a little container to control and manage my bobbins. Now, another thing is, this is the needle organizer. I like to make sure that I have many varieties and sizes of sewing needles at home at all times. There's no bigger bummer than if you're sewing and you need to get a new sewing machine needle and you don't have it. And the only highlight is you can run down to your local Moore Sewing Center and you can pick one up there. But I like to have them on hand at home, ready to go at all times. And I have a good variety, you know, jeans, universal, quilting, it doesn't matter. I make sure that I have a variety of those needles on hand at home at all times. And then let's talk about scissors. Everyone needs a nice pair of sewing shears that's super sharp, and make sure they're only used for fabrics. You don't want to use paper or anything else to dull those blades. Another thing that we have is our lighted pin picker upper. Now, my cabinet downstairs is super high, and I can't just bend over and reach the ground because my chair is also high so that I'm at the proper sewing height. So this item that telescopes, it's got a light, you can see, is super important so that I can wrangle those rogue pins that try to run away from me with ease. And I love it, and I have it near me every single time I sew. The other thing is the number 2 pencil. Marking on dark fabrics, it is my go-to item, and I have never had pencil not come out in the wash It's a pleasure to use, and I use it all the time. And then we have another pair of scissors. These are our serrated scissors. Serrated scissors are a plus. I do a lot of applique, and I love the way they grip your fabric as opposed to pushing it away. It just makes cutting a breeze. And then we have, oh my golly, my Rotary Cutter. And this is the Quilter Select. I love it. And if it gets lost in the mess of whenever I'm sewing, so sometimes a book will end up on top of it, fabrics, a quilt block, it doesn't matter what it is. If I can't find it, I really shut down until I find my Rotary Cutter. And I have this one in 2 different sizes, the 60 as well as the 45. Love my Rotary Cutter. And then we have pin cushions. Everyone needs a pin cushion, and why not have a homemade pin cushion? I have a ton of them. This is my little travel one. I just used some leftover scraps, sewed it together, made a tube. Oh my golly, Michelle, get it together. Filled it with sand, and it's ready to go in my travel items. And then we have the professional tool turner. I know I talk about this guy a lot. I love it that it is actually not round, so it's not going to roll away if it gets on a hard surface. This ballpoint tip is not going to poke through when you're trying to get corners out. It really does make your job when you're turning something or if you're poking out a corner a breeze. I love my professional tool turner. And then we have Best Press, the Fabric Wrangler. It will get those unwanted wrinkles and stuff under control. And I love that this one is peaches and cream. It's my favorite scent that they have. So Best Press is my friend. And then we have a measuring tape. Now this one I think is really important. I like my measuring tapes that they go to 120 inches. I want to be able to measure from the top of my quilt all the way to the bottom and have it go at one pull from my measuring tape. So I do like a long measuring tape, and I do have some short ones, but they don't get the use. I always go to my long measuring tape one. And then we have the double-sided lint brush. Now this was my very first More Sewing with Michele when I went overseas sewing machine maintenance. I really do love these, and I like that they have the long bristles. I can get in and get those dust bunnies out, and it just makes cleaning my machine a breeze. And every time I change my bobbin, I do brush out and make sure that those dust bunnies are under control. And then this is a super important one. Let me see if I can find, there it is. Spool caps. How many of you don't use your spool caps? I use mine all the time. My machine came with 3 different ones. I have the small one that I use whenever I do machine embroidery. I have the large one and then the medium size. And I use them religiously. The large one, anytime I have those old spools that have all those nibs and stuff, or if it has the thread containment slot, oftentimes when the thread is coming off the spool, it will get caught, and then you'll have a problem with the machine sewing correctly. That's why we want to use these spool caps. Just get in the habit of putting them on. They really do make your sewing a little bit less dramatic than if you have something that goes awry. And then I have 2 different things for chalk. So I have the number 2 pencil that I use when I mark things on light fabrics. These are for my dark fabrics. So we have the General's pencil, and then I also have this one. This is more of a loose powder. So I use the General if it's something I'm going to wash. I use this loose powder, the Clover one, if it's something that I'm not going to wash. So if it's a bag or something and I want to be able just to completely wipe away the powder, then I use this one. But I love both of these, and I have them near me at all times. And then we have that purple thing. It's a stylus, it's a measuring device, so many things. It's important, and I make sure that I have one near me. Another thing that I'm pretty avid about, and if it gets misplaced when I'm sewing, I lose my mind, is my little stubby machine screwdriver. That's what they're called. And I like to make sure that I have it with me, and I always know where it is. I put it on top of my machine so it doesn't get lost or misplaced in the shuffle. But really important to have a nice stubby screwdriver for your sewing machine. And then I have my hand sewing needles. Still have to use them. Not everything can be done on my machine, but I like to have them contained and ready to go at all times. And then with that, we have the needle threader for hand sewing. This one, oops, it ran away from me. This one is lighted as well. So I'm no spring chicken. My eyesight is definitely not what it used to be. And I use and will always use, I think until the day I die, a needle threader now. And then Wonder Clips. It's in the name. They're wonderful. For anything that you can't pin, these things can at least hold it together so you can get it sewn. I love my Wonder Clips. Hemostats. This is another thing that I use to wrangle those dust bunnies. I like it because I can use that tip, get into where I need to be, pull out the dust bunny, or if I need to hold something in a long area. Oftentimes I will use it also to pull something through if I made a tool. So I love my hemostats. And then Jack the Ripper, or your seam ripper, or your sewing undoing tool. Doesn't matter what you call it, they're super important. We all need them. I don't care what type of sewer you are. At some point, you are going to have to use your seam ripper. And it's not always because you did something wrong. I've had patterns where it tells you to use your seam ripper, for instance, in the button area to cut those threads. So a seam ripper is super important. Make sure that you have a nice sharp one. And I love and have many seam rippers with me at all times. And then we have, oh my golly, Kimberbell's paper tape. Now this paper tape is absolutely amazing. You can sew over it, and then when you go to pull it apart, it's not going to distort the stitches that you sewn on. So if my glue stick doesn't work, and if I need something that gives a little bit more security until I sew, I will use my paper tape. I do not only use it with machine embroidery, I will also use it in other sewing that I do. So I love my Kimberbell paper tape. And then we have this little add-a-quarter ruler. I have multiple add-a-quarter rulers, but I love this one. I have it near me at my machine at all times. Every time I do binding on my quilt, I use it so that I can measure and make sure that it's precise, those two ends that come together. I love having just a nice little short ruler with me next to my machine at all times. It doesn't matter if I'm just checking the size of something. I love it, and I have it near me at all times. And then what else do we got here? We've got the Quilter Select glue pen, and I use this all the time too. There's so many times where it's not practical to use your pen, and if you can add just a little bit of extra security before you sew, why not? This one will go on yellow, it dries clear, and it really does make things easier and simplifies the process a lot of times. And then we have my curved scissors. I told you we had a few pairs of scissors in here. Now these blades have a slight curve, and the advantages and why they are so important to me is if I'm cutting something that's round, it makes it easier to cut around, but also if I turn it over the other way and I need to cut a thread, it makes it easier to get right next to that fabric so that I can cut very closely. I love my curved blade scissors, and I use them all the time. And oh, look, it's got a cap. Go figure. And then we've got the finger press tool. So this is if you're not near your iron, if you just want to do something real quick, maybe your iron isn't plugged in, you don't want to wait for it to heat up. This little tool will press down and open those seams or press them to one size and just does things nice and neat. I don't always use it, but when I want to use it is usually in a pinch where I'm doing something really fast, and I like that it's near so that I can just finger press something real quick and move along. And then we also have my magnetic pin holder. I have two of them. I have one that holds my Wonder Pins and one that holds my glass tipped that I use at different times, and super valuable, and I love that they kind of keep everything nice and contained. I love that you can use it upside down and it'll pick up those pins. It's just a fun, interesting tool to have that kind of makes things easier. I can kind of toss my pin and it will whoop, like fall down by that magnet and I don't have to worry about them falling on the floor. Although, if they do, I have a tool to pick them up as well. And that's it. That's everything in my bag. So, these are the items in my arsenal. These are the items I go to. And these are the items, these tools and notions that I have in my arsenal for every time that I sew. I hope that you've learned something or maybe went, yeah, that's a good idea. Either way, it's been my pleasure to show you what I have. So it's a wrap. It's another final episode of More Sewing with Michele. Don't forget, we have the Lori Holt tin mug that I love, and then we also have the tumbler. And I've been drinking out of mine. I am so enjoying it. Love these two things. You can pick them up at more-sew.com or click on the link in the description. And then also, you can also pick up there some of the items that I have in my handy dandy arsenal for sewing notions and tools. A lot of them I've shown on More Sewing with Michele before, and other ones are stuff that you probably already have at home. Super important, and I love that I have them with me. It's been my pleasure once again to have you spend a little bit of time with me. I look forward to seeing you next week, and until then, bye-bye!